Strange little cross in the road here marks the exact spot where the bishops, Latimer and Ridley, and the Archbishop of Canterbury,
not a ghost but a drunk.
Archbishop of Canterbury, Thomas Cranmer, was burnt here. The two, well, let me explain why they were burnt. I don't want to bore you with too much history. We'll just let this guy go past.
Let him get his jollies.
He's happy.
So that's part of the tour?
Could be, actually.
Could arrange for that.
It's a combination of
He sounds
no
willing
brains and lager. Anyway. Right, so where are we? Yeah, so the two. This was a scene of some of the. Well, it was a horrific scene. This was in October. I'll give you the exact date. October 16th, 1556, when Latimer and Ridley were burnt here. Cranmer was burnt a few months later. But why were they burnt? Well, I don't want to bore you too much history, but I have to really. Henry VIII was the King of England. His first wife was Catherine of Aragon. She did produce a daughter, Mary, Princess Mary. At that time, England was a Catholic country. Mary was brought up a Catholic. She only bore him the one child, though. He desperately wanted a son, and plus he didn't particularly like it anyway. So he wanted a divorce. The Catholic Church is very clear about this. He couldn't divorce, so his only option was to break away from the Church of Rome and become. England became a separate Church of England and became a Protestant church. Despite going through, I think, 5 more wives, Henry VIII, he did only produce the one son, who became King Edward VI. But unfortunately, he was a particularly unhealthy man and only lived a few years after, or only reigned for a few years. The next in line to the throne was Mary, the eldest daughter, who had been brought up a Catholic. This caused a great problem because by now England was a Protestant country. Thomas Cranmer had introduced the Book of Common Prayer, and many of the Protestants, particularly Cranmer and Latimer and Ridley, supported Lady Jane Grey, who had a very tenuous link to the throne, but she was a Protestant. But the rules are very clear. Mary was next in line to the throne, so she became the next next monarch. And so all her advisors basically told her, you've got to get rid of these Protestants. They're going to be plotting against you. They are going to be, stabbing you behind your back. Literally, they're going to be plotting behind your back. So she really felt she had no choice. She had to literally get rid of them quickly. And something like 300 were burnt altogether, 300 Protestants. But the 3 most prominent were burnt here: Latimer, Ridley, and Cranmer. Now the first to go were Latimer and Ridley. They had to wait to get permission from the Pope to burn Cranmer because he'd have been the Archbishop of Canterbury. So he was imprisoned just behind the walls here. The city walls were just behind these shop fronts with the city walls, and Cranmer was forced to watch this event unfold. Now the first one to burn here, because they burnt them separately, was Nicholas Ridley. Now he was pretty fortunate because, no it wasn't, it was Hugh Latimer, damn it. It was Hugh Latimer who was the first one to go, and he was pretty fortunate because he had lots of friends in Oxford, and someone managed to slip him some gunpowder. And what they used to do was put gunpowder underneath their collar, and this was actually a very humane act because once the flames reached your neck, your head blew off, and of course the pain went with that, and the crowd loved that too, of course, to see, because the crowd just loves seeing people burnt, of course, and to see the head fly into. I think it actually ended up in Balliol College here. The walls weren't quite so high then, but anyway, Hugh Latimer's head just flew off, and that was good because the pain was over. Now Nicholas Ridley, who was the second to go, was not so lucky. He didn't have any friends in Oxford. No one managed to slip him any gunpowder. Most of the fuel had already expired, and so he was placed in the same place where his colleague was, and it took something like an hour for him to burn. Eyewitness reports have said that for much of that hour he was just burnt from the his lower half was completely burnt, and his top half remained fairly burn-free, and he certainly remained conscious. Can you imagine the pain of just having your lower half burnt and still being conscious? His screams could be heard. Well, I'm exaggerating, of course, but his screams was pretty loud anyway. And even the crowd who had actually come here to, because they really wanted to see him gone, started to feel sorry for him. In fact, many of them went to the nearby trees and grabbed branches and leaves and started to throw them on the fire to try and get the flames going again. And it took something like an hour for Nicholas Ridley to finally burn and die. And it's his screams that you can hear on the 16th of October at midnight. They used to burn people at midnight in those days. We reckon about midnight. Come here, 16th of October. You can hear the screams. Hopefully, it won't be quite as noisy as it is right now. Anyway, so what happened to Cranmer? Well, Cranmer was forced to watch all this, and apparently he wrote a few recantations. He wrote, I'm now a very good Catholic, I don't want to go through all that. But the Queen wasn't satisfied with that. She particularly hated Cranmer because he was the man who agreed to the divorce of her mother from the King. And so she wasn't satisfied. He was forced to go to the university church and confess in public that he was now a good Catholic and all of his Protestant ways were now history. He couldn't do it. He simply couldn't do it. His faith would not allow him to do that. So he was, of course, brought here and set fire to as well. Bit of drama with Thomas Cranmer. Apparently, he was able to release his right hand, and he thrust his right hand into the flame and said, to anyone that could hear, as my right hand wrote my recantation, so my right hand must burn first. So he was able to set fire to his right hand and his right arm before the rest of him caught fire. So there's a bit of drama there with Cranmer. This, by the way, was March 1556. It took a few months before the Pope agreed that he should be burned, by the way. So that all happened here. This is a hugely important part in the history of England. Bloody Mary really went a bit too far. The people started to feel anti-Catholic. And of course, when Queen Elizabeth became the Queen of England, England completely got rid of the Catholicism and became a Protestant country, and our constitution is very clear: we can never ever have a Catholic monarch again since Bloody Mary. She did irreparable damage to the Catholic Church in this country. And in fact, someone told me the other day, we cannot even have a Catholic Prime Minister in this country. That's how much damage she did. Although in the defence of this, it wasn't just Catholics burning Protestants. There were many Protestants burning Catholics, and the most famous one I think would be Thomas More, who was an Oxford man who wrote Utopia. He was killed by Henry VIII simply because he wouldn't agree to the divorce. He wouldn't agree to Henry VIII divorcing. So Henry VIII had him killed, basically for being a good Catholic. So it went both ways, but Bloody Mary was by far the worst, and she did by far kill more people than any other monarch in her short 5-year reign. Okay, so let's now go into the oldest part of Oxford. We won't go via Turl Street, we'll go via the theatre and the Bodleian Library into the oldest part of the city, where we'll find many more ghosts. Right, we're now within the oldest part of Oxford, and the best way to prove that to you, I can't do it right now, is if you go to a pub. In fact, we're going to finish the tour back here under the Bridge of Sighs, just down there, just down that alleyway between the stone and the brick building. It's a pub called the Turf Tavern. If you go down there, as well as seeing the pub, you'll also see the old city wall, which still exists. So the old city wall would have gone right behind us here and back along Broad Street. So we're now very much in the oldest part of Oxford, where we'll be spending the rest of the tour. And we'll come down New College Lane, which is the lane underneath the bridge here, from the opposite direction. It is the most haunted lane in Oxford, and hopefully it'll be a little bit darker. Well, it will be a little bit darker by the time we come up the lane from the opposite direction. I can't ignore this bridge though, much as I'd like to. It's called the Bridge of Sighs, and someone's asked me about questions I get in the past. Someone actually said to me the other day, it's not very big, why do you call it the Bridge of Sighs? So anyway, I used to assume everybody understood this and knew why it's called the Bridge of Sighs, but they don't. So I'll quickly explain it in case you're unaware of why it's called the Bridge of Sighs. It's kind of ghost related. Bridge of Sighs, and by the way, this is actually not a very good copy of the Bridge of Sighs. It's a combination of two Venetian bridges, the Bridge of Sighs in the middle and the Rialto Bridge on the sides. But the most famous bridge in Venice is the Bridge of Sighs, and this is because on one side of the Bridge of Sighs you have the courts, the Doge's palace where all the sort of justice was administered, and on the other side of the Bridge of Sighs you had the prisons. So if you were found guilty, like say Jeffrey Archer for example, you're going to be a little bit upset, aren't you? So if you were found guilty, you're at the Bridge of Sighs to be imprisoned or simply executed if you've done something pretty bad. So you're a little bit upset. So S-I-G-H-ing, yes? So that's why the original Bridge of Sighs, you probably all knew this, but in case you didn't, that's why the original Bridge of Sighs is called the Bridge of Sighs. This is just a copy of the Bridge of Sighs. Nothing like that ever happened here. It's just an attractive way of linking two parts of a college, that's all it is. But I assumed at the original Bridge of Sighs in Venice there are plenty of ghosts because a lot of people would have been executed having been led over the Bridge of Sighs. All right. Well, so the British Science sadly is not haunted. Not this one anyway. What we're going to do now is going to go past the Bodleian Library on our right. When in fact all these buildings here on our left, on our right, are part of the Bodleian Library. It's named after Thomas Bodley, who doesn't haunt the library named after him, but he does haunt his old college library, Merton, where we're heading. So we're going to walk past the Bodleian Library to get to the University Church next, which is haunted. So let's head down towards the church.